We're here at Comicpalooza with the great Gerry Conway. Gerry, how you doing?
Doing good, thanks.
All right, so Gerry, you've created a multitude of characters, to say the least. The most famous probably being a toss-up between Punisher and Ms. Marvel.
Well, right now, yeah.
Right now, yeah. Yeah, right now. Real quick, when you proposed the idea of the Punisher, did you get much kickback?
Not really. He was intended to be a, well, if not a straightforward villain, he was intended to be kind of a dark character that was supposed to introduce another character called the Jackal. And in his original conception was not expected to last more than an issue or two. But as we developed it and saw the potential for the character, we were pretty happy with how it turned out.
That's cool. So, I guess, what did you have in mind when they say we want a character to go opposite Spider-Man? I mean, what were your influences for the Punisher? Was it like Dirty Harry or?
Well, there were a lot of vigilante tropes afloat in that particular era of the early 70s. You had Dirty Harry, you had the Executioner, there were various Charles Bronson type movies that were coming out, and it was also a time when crime was really on everybody's minds in New York. The idea of a vigilante solving those problems seemed, part of the general atmosphere.
Because, I mean, I think that's, some people do kind of get it in their minds where, they can take the law into their own hands. And then here's a guy who's actually kind of like a Stone Cold Steve Austin of his day. I mean, he, kind of, takes the law into his own hands. And he's, I guess, that guide for, the reader and the audience.
Well, he was never intended to be a hero, per se. He's an anti-hero. He's sort of I guess you would say is a kind of dark figure that shouldn't be emulated, but shows sort of the logical consequence of a character like Batman, or any character that's devoted to taking down bad guys. At some point or other, if you're not operating through the law, you're going to reach the conclusion, probably, that you're above the law, and that's a very tricky and difficult situation for a character to be in. And Frank Castle gives us a window into the problems that might present.
Were you happy with any of the film adaptations of The Punisher?
Yeah, I was extremely happy with the Netflix adaptation. I think John Barenthal nails the character.
Me too.
He's just terrific. He comes across as the kind of guy you do not want to meet in a dark alley. And he looks like he would seriously
hurt you,
be the guy who'd take this as far as he could. And I like the fact that the showrunner of the series addressed PTSD as a aspect of the Punisher's psychology, because that really is what has pushed him over the edge.
Yeah, and I mean, it was kind of touched upon in like some of the comic book series too. That he's a Vietnam War veteran. Like the 2004 Thomas Jane adaptation, touched on him being in the Gulf War, but it didn't have anything to do with him having PTSD. It was more like, okay, you killed my family, I'm going to kill you.
Well, I mean, when I think what happens for soldiers is a traumatic experience. I mean, even if they don't come out of it with PTSD, they're asked to go to the far limits of what human beings are able to experience, and it's traumatizing. If they're not welcomed back into society and made to feel like their service is honored, I could see them, being genuinely distressed and pushed to the edge.
Now, when you create a character from like scratch, what is your thought process when you're creating them?
Well, I asked myself a bunch of questions, starting with what does this character want?
Right.
Who is he? What's his backstory? What has made him the person that he is? I try to get into his or her mindset as much as I can, and flesh out the details that will give that character life. Sometimes with characters that are intended to be throwaway, one-shot characters, you don't go that deeply. But if you're really trying to develop a character that's got any breadth, you have to know a lot more than what you put on the page.
Fair enough. Final question: what was Marvel like in the '70s? What was New York like in the '70s for you? Like Marvel and New York in the '70s. There we go.
Well, I was very young, so it was probably like any city for somebody in their late teens, early 20s. Exciting, crazy, overwhelming, full of potential and fun. But it was a very dangerous place. New York in the early 70s was on the cusp of falling into a financial crisis that pretty much swept over throughout the 70s. Marvel was a scene of chaos in the early 70s. The company had gone from being a publisher of about 15 titles a month to expanding within a year or two to 50 titles a month without really expanding its staff. So the creators were pretty much on our own. We were given a lot of leeway that you would not be given today by the corporate structure that runs comics. So we made it up pretty much flying by the seat of our pants.
That's amazing. That's usually where like the best comics came from. I mean, for the most part, 60s and 70s, you had this like explosion of insane creativity
and ideas and talent.
I mean, it's a strong argument for letting creators have their head, but you know, the corporations that own the companies now are much more concerned about brand maintenance.
Right.
And I understand that. They've invested billions and billions of dollars in these companies, and they want to be sure that they appeal to the broadest possible audience and are consistent. On the other hand, they wouldn't have these companies if they hadn't let people be crazy.
True.
So what are you working on at the moment? Are you retired or?
Well, I'm fairly well retired, but I am doing occasional projects for Marvel and occasional things for DC. I'm going to be doing a piece for the Marvel 80th anniversary work that's coming out this summer. So I hope to continue to do things like that.
Awesome. Well, Gerry, thank you so much. This is Gerry, that's Jason, I'm Bobby, this is Bayou City Geeks. Thanks so much.